Okay, next on stage we have Irina Farooq, and she is the head of open data analytics at Google Cloud. Wow, so many amazing titles today. Hi, Irina, welcome to the stage.
Thank you so much, and good morning, good evening, good afternoon, wherever folks are.
I know so many time zones. Anna, who was hosting earlier today, it's already late at night for her, past 10 o'clock kind of thing. So we've got people all over the world. It's part of the fun of being part of this group globally.
Well, thank you for having me. I'm super honored to be here and share my journey.
Well, we're so happy to have you. And I'll take a minute to say a little bit more about you before we throw it over to you. So Irina leads the product management and strategy for the Managed Data Lake product portfolio at Google Cloud. So lots to unpack in there. Irina has over 15 years of product leadership experience across a variety of sectors. So very focused in her career on the product side of things. So prior to Google, she was the chief product officer at Kinetica. And before that, VP of products and strategy at Riverbed Technology. So really focused in there, has a computer science degree from MIT and an MBA and a few other degrees. So really excited to hear you share today with us, Irina, about going from refugee to tech executive, because the titles that we just named there are very impressive no matter where your story started. So please take it away. I'm very excited to hear about your journey.
Thank you so much, Margot. And thank you very much for having me here. It's so humbling to be here among such incredible women and such incredible stories. As Margot mentioned, I feel incredibly lucky to have a career in tech, doing what I absolutely love to do, even though most of it cannot be understood or told about it at parties. So I try to not to bore my friends, but this is something that I'm passionate about. But today I'm here to tell you just a little bit of kind of how I got here. As an immigrant, as a mother, as usually the only woman in the room in technology where decisions are made. And I'll share a few lessons that I learned along the way or kind of navigated or bumble my way through in the hopes that some of them, you may find some of them useful, and maybe they will even make your own journeys just a little bit easier as you navigate your careers. So I grew up in Russia, outside of Moscow. As you see by the serious formal pictures, you weren't supposed to smile in the formal pictures. And I was incredibly lucky. I grew up in a highly educated, loving, supporting family. I was always a math and science geek. With the support of my parents, I won probably almost every local math competition. Math was my thing. But my parents always told me that I could be anything I wanted to be, but there was an asterisk. I would have to work 10 times harder and have a really thick skin. And the reason for that was that we were a minority. We were Jewish. And my family history was full of incredible people who had never realized their full potential because quotas didn't allow it, or they were actually scared for their physical safety because of their faith or their kind of, back then it was actually called different nationality. So when I was 14 years old, my parents made a very bold decision of immigrating to America as refugees. Today, I'm the same age as my mother was when we came to this country. And I can tell you, I can never imagine moving to a different country with different culture, with different language, with different norms, and starting over with two little kids. But our parents did that because they really wanted to make sure that wherever we were able to reach our full potential. That my brother and I never had to deal with what generations of my family has had to deal with for the years to come. So we came to America and we came to New York City. And imagine my excitement. This is like a typical melting pot photo of New York. There were all these incredible people from different backgrounds, all coexisting peacefully together in what seemed to me like a boundless opportunity to succeed, and all of them being equal. I have to admit, some of our landing was a little bit rough, especially for me, because there I was, having been a star student, excelling, expecting to go to some of the top universities, whatever the quota allowed. And here I was in 10th grade, not speaking a word of English, showing up to my first day in an American high school in New York. And really, like the first lesson was history, the second one was English, and not having a single clue of anything that anybody was saying. But then the next language was math, lesson was math. And I sat there quietly because I couldn't speak, but I kept looking at the teacher solving the problem in what seemed to me the world's most inefficient way. So at the end of the class, not bothered by the fact that I couldn't communicate, I walked up to that board and rewrote the entire solution. She looked at me with the world's kindest eyes, smiled, and said, "You need to be bumped up a class." And, that one interaction gave me that incredible source of confidence in the moment that I needed. That while I didn't have any friends or didn't speak the language or didn't understand the norms, I spoke one universal language that was math that I could lean on as my source of strength while I develop our capabilities in this country. Funny enough, that same teacher played another important role in my life, where 2 years later, she found me and she said, "Are you applying to MIT?" I looked at her in bewilderment. I said, "What is that?" I didn't know it existed. I didn't know how to spell it. I didn't know whether I belonged there once I found out what it is. And she told me, "You absolutely should." And I would say, and 6 months later, 9 months later, I was headed to college there. But that encouragement and somebody coming out and saying, "You belong here," has really kind of had a profound impact on my life. So there I was a few years later, graduating with, wait for it, degree in math and computer science, and headed to Silicon Valley with the full determination and belief that now I was going to make my parents proud, that the sacrifice and the commitment they made to make us equal, now I was going to bring that to reality for my whole family. But I landed as a woman in tech. And to be honest, that landing was not as smooth because all of a sudden I had these question marks attached to me in this most subtle and persistent way. "Oh, don't worry, this will not be too technical." Or, "You're being too aggressive when you come up to the whiteboard." Or, my favorite still to this day, "You don't look like an engineer." I usually respond to that, "What does an engineer look like?" And, that doesn't typically get a response from people. It's just a pause for thinking. But in that moment, I had a little bit of a crisis because I said, I am neither willing to accept or admit to myself that I'm going to have that minority status again, that the entire frame of our life to getting there and kind of having that equal chance and thinking about introspecting, what can I do better? But also trying to understand, how do I take ownership of this? That I don't become and kind of embrace that secondary status that I was being immersed in as I came out of college. I'm happy to report today that I've come a long way from that little 21-year-old girl that was confused about her role in the world to the woman I am today, who spends most of her days probably as the single woman in the room, but you can be sure that my opinion is always heard. I'm also someone who was able to, a job ago, walk into a boardroom of 12 men and give a presentation of my life to get a promotion without ever actually bothering or thinking whether they liked me, whether I fit in. I just had the ability to come and be myself, embrace that. This journey has taken a while, right, to come from here to there. And in a large part, it was due to so many wonderful mentors and sponsors and family and friends who have supported me along the way and giving me that guidance and reassurance that I truly belong here. But at the same time, there were also principles that I had to synthesize and crystallize for myself to tell myself how to frame my own mind and how to deal and adapt and most importantly, thrive in its environment. And, I'll go through a few of those, and hopefully some of you may find those helpful. The first and the most important one to me is choosing your core travelers. Let's be clear, there are a lot of biased people out there, but there are also a lot of wonderful, inclusive, supportive people. We can choose who to spend our energy on. And when I go into a new environment, when I go to interview for a job, I am not just letting them interview me. I am interviewing them for those characteristics that before I come into this environment and commit myself 110%, I need to be sure that these people will be invested in my success. Right. And, the Socrates quote has always struck with me because I can focus all my energy on fighting the old world, or I can be part of building that new and making sure that new world is there to support me in my own growth. For example, in all my interviews, I bring up that I'm a mother, and I see that person's split second reaction to see, do they think I'm less worthy? Or did they not even flinch? Because I will come there and commit my full being to this job, but I don't want to start from behind when somebody thinks I'm less worthy. The second thing, one of the most useful advices I've ever gotten from one of my mentors, he looked at me and he said, Irina, if you're not living on the edge of being fired, you're not pushing hard enough. And at that time, early in my career, I looked at him and I said, what are you talking about? I'm just barely making it by, and you're saying I have to live on the edge of being fired. But having progressed through my career, that was probably the most useful advice I've ever gotten. Because when you think about leaders and things as leaders that we're supposed to do, we're required to take hard decisions, push the envelope in cases where the decisions are not obvious or not everybody agrees, which does mean you're one org change or administration change away potentially from being fired. And so sometimes you win and sometimes you lose, but you always take on this broader purpose to challenge yourself and continue to grow. In my case, that was, switching to product management from engineering 3 months out of college, and thinking for the first year that every day that I was going to get fired. I didn't. I succeeded. But also changing roles or giving up in successful kind of big organizations and starting out as IC again because I wanted to learn something new. Those were the key pillars that kind of living on that edge of getting fired. The other thing is kind of being an outsider or perceived outsider in this world. It's very easy to see, well, this person knows how to do this and this person knows how to do that. And I have to learn all those things in order to have a place at the table. But I think it's important to kind of pivot it around and say the most important thing is to discover and lean into your superpowers. Because, when you observe some of the most impressive leaders that we worked with, actually some of them have pretty big flaws. And you sit there and you think, well, how do you not know how to do that? But what you realize is that there are a few things they're so exceptional in. And then they've learned how to compensate for the rest by building teams that are better than them at those other capabilities. And so discovering your superpowers and then leaning into them, I think is one of the most crucial things as you go and progress and become successful in your career. For me, and this one may be a little bit different, but I see motherhood as my superpower and not a handicap. I started having kids actually fairly early in my career. So my career only took off once I had kids. But I agonized a lot about what it would mean for my career and how do I balance. And I remember being in a meeting with my manager at the time and sharing with him that I was pregnant with my first child. And him looking at me and saying, oh yeah, by the way, we're going to put a new manager over you. And I said, well, I want to be the manager. When I joined, we talked about that. And he looked at me and he said, well, actually, you're not ready. And there I was thinking, okay, this is it. This is the motherhood penalty. This is, what the world has been telling me about. But I'm happy to say that 4 years later, I was the same woman, pregnant with my second child, and getting an out-of-band raise while I was on maternity leave because my company was very worried that maybe I won't come back. And then when I came back, they gave me a job that was 10x the job that I had before. And the reason it's my superpower because it teaches me empathy. It teaches me patience. It teaches me to act every single day like the whole world is watching. Because everything I do around my children, I know they're watching and I know there is a consequence and an impact on everything that I'm doing. The next thing is, there's been a lot of talk today about authenticity. I think part of being authentic is actually giving up the fact that you want everybody to like you. And once you give it up, it's the most liberating feeling because you truly do take your power back and you can find out how amazing you can be. It's very unsettling for people, especially to see a woman who doesn't care about being liked. Like, are you sure? Like, lots of people are going to get upset if you're going to do this. And I'm like, I am sure. I am here not to be liked. I'm here to be respected. And I'm here to drive change with empathy and with strength and help push the organization forward. And if I'm just striving to being liked, I'm never going to be, or the organization will not be, where we need it to be. One of the last topics that I have is the imposter syndrome. I'm sure many of us have felt it. I was initially in my career completely paralyzed by it. This idea that I was this fraud and I was going to be found out every moment. The most kind of compelling story, I was put in a VP of engineering role where I was a product person, and we were trying to sell a company, and the CTO of that large public company seemed to me like this god that knew everything. And every meeting with him, I said, okay, this is the meeting. I get found out, and everybody knows I'm a fraud. And then when I left my company and I started looking for a job, the first person to offer me a job, a big engineering job at that, was that CTO. So I think as we go through and deal with our imposter syndromes, there's kind of a scale here. And I would say the first thing, just accept and trust the people that put you there. As a leader, if I put somebody into a bigger role, I am taking a personal risk to my own career. And I know that I believe that they will be successful. So at the very least, trust your leaders. And hopefully over time, most of us can get to the right side of this diagram, where we'll truly believe that we're here because we earned it. And we're here because we belong. And of course, I wouldn't be me if I didn't leave you with some math. The best thing we can do to drive change is to invest in the next generation of leaders. As Indra Nui said, women helping each other, coaching, mentoring, and providing tips is a great way for us to be our own force. So I always think about that. And if I help 2 people a year, and over 20 years, I will influence 40 people directly. But if each one of them goes on and impacts another 2 people and another 2 people, and we start our own 3, then over the course of 20 years, I can influence over 1 million people. Each one of us can be a root node of a movement. If we just reach out and see somebody struggling or reassure them that they belong and provide advice and coaching that may just take 10, 15 minutes of our time over a period of time. So I want to leave you kind of with the hope, and I'm so encouraged to see so many women and supporters and allies on this goal. And I'm hoping that we all start a movement, and each of us will be the root node of that million person movement. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Irina. What a wonderful talk that you presented to us today. Such a mix of kind of you in the boardroom, you in different situations. And it's so fun when we get those anecdotes and we can kind of picture you in those situations, really bringing your full power to all of those scenarios. So thank you so much for sharing.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Yes, of course, you can see some nice kind of comments coming through on the screen there too. Lots of people saying so inspiring. Thanks for being here. So thank you from everyone at Women Tech Network and our whole audience here with us today around the world. That was such a pleasure, Irina.
Thank you. Cheers.
Bye for now.